My comic shop closed 7 years ago, but along my journey, I've met other stores with colorful communities all their own. One of those is Fat Moose Comics in Whippany, New Jersey, the oldest in the Garden State. Now, as it celebrates its milestone 40th anniversary, I am speaking with Fat Moose owners, staff, and customers through the years. This is their comic shop history. Welcome to Oldest in New Jersey, a My Comic Shop history event. I am your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me for part 3 are two longtime members of the Fat Moose herd, customers Gene Cahill and Phil Maenza. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hey, Anthony.
Thank you.
It's such a pleasure
To be here.
Pleasure to have you guys. One of the objectives with this event is not only to speak to the owners of the shop, but also to speak to the other representatives of the Fat Moose community, the herd, as it were. And I know you both have long tenures as being part of that community, so I think it'll be a lot of fun for us to speak for this episode. Phil, I'm going to start with you for a couple of reasons. Number one, I want to thank you publicly to you on the show here. You did the artwork for this Oldest in New Jersey event. So I want to thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And you also, and I did talk about this last year, but you also did the artwork for the longer Halloween, my 2020-2021 event where I reunited with the Alternate Realities gang. So I want to thank you to you for your awesome work. I really do appreciate it. I also want to toss it to you because you, in part, inspired this run of episodes. You do,
really?
Yeah. So you do a YouTube show. Can you tell people what the show is and anything that you want to share about it? Because that's going to segue into my point here.
Sure. So my channel is Philtastic Comics and Art, and it's basically me speaking in my basement for hours upon end, occasionally the kitchen, about really anything comic book or art related. It's just something that I do for fun. And, you know, I'm a little under a year, I think, or so now, but having a good time doing it. Check it out.
Yes, I encourage everyone to check out Philtastic on YouTube. And I bring that up because I pulled about 30 seconds of audio from one of your old videos. And when I play it, I think it will become clear why you are in part an inspiration for this run of episodes. So without further ado, here's a clip. Here's a clip from the Philtastic YouTube channel.
It was never the plan to own a comic shop, but it was either I take it over or it goes away forever, and I couldn't let that happen.
Yeah, we would need, I think, a separate. I got to ask Anthony if he could ever do that. I think Anthony needs to tell the story of Fat Moose. I feel like he'd be better equipped than anybody.
Who? Anthony?
Yep.
Better equipped than me?
No. To direct it and film it.
Like
Yeah.
a documentary thing. Well, we're having talks about doing something of that nature. But yeah, so that's my store.
So there you have it. Now, of course, I featured Fat Moose on this podcast before, and it played a fairly prominent role in the documentary film, My Comic Shop Country. But as far as doing something dedicated to Fat Moose, again, I know you specifically suggested a documentary. It ended up being this podcast event. But Phil, I got to tell you, I got such a kick out of watching that for Sean's reaction. He was so offended. And I'm sorry, that of course was Sean Hendricks. I know people have heard him on the show before, but if anyone happens to be listening to part 3 of this, and this is their first exposure, Sean Hendricks, current owner of Fat Moose Comics. But yes, when you suggested to him that I would be perfect to tell Moose's story, his reaction was priceless. But would you expect anything else?
Of course not. But he's got way too much on his hands. He would be like, look, I was going to do it, and I started with puppets, and then Justin couldn't be here. And if Sean were to do it, he's got so much on his plate, we wouldn't get until like maybe the 43rd anniversary.
Now we would get puppets.
We would get puppets, yes.
Puppets, that's right, because on the Fat Moose Comics YouTube channel, Sean does these fairly regular videos, and I know he incorporates puppets and really puts a lot into it, and it makes it a fun show. So again, I thank you. That definitely planted a little bit of the seed in my head that this would be something, worth exploring. Like Sean said, I mean, we had been speaking a little bit about doing something, but I think that really kind of helped solidify it for me. So the first question then, Phil, is a big picture question. Why? What is it about Fat Moose for you that made you pose that question to Sean? Like, why is it, I mean, I know for me, but for you, like, why is it worthy of this more long form exploration?
You know, Fat Moose has always been just such a unique place. You know, I'm not going to tell you it was kismet when I walked in the door the first time, like, oh, this is my shop. But it's something that when I stop and think about it, it's always been somewhere to go, you know, not just to buy comics, but just to, you know, sit and talk. It's, I hate to say this because I know Sean says it all the time. It really does feel like you're going to Cheers. You know, you walk in there, everybody knows your name. Everybody's always friendly. And it's quite easy for a quick, honey, I'm just going to run to the store and pick up my books to, yeah, okay, it's 3 hours later. Sorry, I was just, you know, sitting talking around.
Gotcha. No, well said. That is definitely the sense that I've gotten from Fat Moose. And it's, as I've said many times before, very reminiscent of my own old comic shop, Alternate Realities. In fact, Phil, I might be mistaken, so forgive me, but were you the Moose customer who said to Sean that you should make a drinking game out of every time I mention Alternate Realities on this podcast?
Yes. When Sean first introduced, I want to say me, but I think really the Fat Moose community to your podcast, I remember I was listening to a couple episodes, and I think this is even before I saw your film. And I said, geez, this guy talks about his old shop a lot. Like, I was telling Sean one day, I was like, it's almost like he's talking about it like an old girlfriend.
I mean, it's my comic shop history. Of course I'm going to talk about my comic shop.
Well, I get it now.
Of course, you know, one of the main reasons why I do talk about it so much is the fact that it closed, it went away. And, you know, you guys came very close to experiencing that. And I'm so happy that it went in a different direction. And we'll talk about all of that. But, I want to jump to Gene now and get a little bit of a sense of your history with Moose. But even before that, you know, and I didn't even ask you guys this beforehand, but Gene, how well do you know Phil?
I've unfortunately not really well. Phil and I have met a few times, and we're friends on Facebook, but our paths don't cross as often as I would like in the shop. I am like a Wednesday night guy, so Phil is usually in earlier. But so I'm part of Sean's crew that shows up after work on Wednesday, and then Sean pulls out the bottle of wild turkey, and everybody has a shot. Sometimes people bring food, like last week on Wednesday, this week, actually, I'm sorry. On Wednesday, one of the guys, Zach, who comes in, brought in a big box of Taco Bell tacos. So it was like bourbon and tacos. Well, we're talking about comics and movies and geek stuff. And it's such a unique place, you know, it really does. When I've seen your documentary and listen to you talk about AR, it's the same sort of thing. It's a community. It's not just a shop. There are stores in New Jersey I've been to where you walk in, they kind of look at you, hey, how you doing? Let me know you want something. They're too busy doing their own thing. They almost don't even care you're in there unless you're spending money. Fat Moose is not like that. If you walk in and hang out for an hour, walk out without buying anything, and you're a customer, Sean's not going to be upset about that. He knows you'll be back because it's, you know, we're the herd. We are literally the Fat Moose herd. So
I want to come back to the name, the herd, and of course talk about your tenure as part of that herd, Gene. But for either or both of you, since you mentioned this, enjoying a cocktail at the shop, I see around the holiday time, in particular, I see this parade of photos that Sean posts of all the liquor that his customers gift him. And I just wonder sometimes, now of course that's a lovely thing and it's so nice that people show their appreciation and that's beautiful. But at the same time, like, whether you guys give him those gifts or not, but you see that he's getting them. Do you ever have any worry that it's like, oh man, this guy, he deals with a lot of numbers, entering stuff in the system. He's pulling books for us. Is there any risk that like this could be counterproductive to the end result that you want in the shop?
I have to tell you, my worry was not so much the numbers. It's like, I know he's running crazy schedules. I've been there and he's downing like Red Bulls like it's water. Like that's more my concern is, okay, well, I want to make sure that you're okay, that you're healthy. But I'll say this, like I tried to give Sean a coffee machine once and he was like, no, I'm good with the Red Bull. It's like, that stuff's really bad for us. I'm good. So I shy away personally from the alcohol and whatnot, but it doesn't matter. He's got a supply coming.
Yes, very, very true. So, Gene, let me toss it back to you and your history with Fat Moose. So, where, at what point do you first encounter Fat Moose Comics?
1984. I was in the Navy. I was stationed in New London, Connecticut. I was on a submarine. I didn't know what I wanted to do after I got out. I was always interested in art. I was reading some comics and it was an ad for the Joe Kubert School. And my wife said, why don't you apply? I said, I'll never get in. He said, yeah, go ahead, try it. Drove to New Jersey on a leave weekend, actually had an interview with Joe Kubert in his studio. And a few weeks later, got a letter saying you are accepted to the Joe Kubert School for fall of 1984. Moved to New Jersey, couldn't get the funding together, and ended up working. And I was looking for a comic shop because in Connecticut, there was a bookstore that also sold comics, but they were one of those dreaded stores that bagged and taped all their new books shut. So you couldn't really browse. It's like if you wanted to look at something, you had to take it up to the counter and they had to open it for you. So I actually saw, if I remember right, I saw a newspaper ad for Fat Moose Comics. And they were in what was called the old Morris County Mall. I went there, met Moose. He was very nice. I opened a reserve box. Then he opened a second store and had a kid working in there that really wasn't doing anything but eating ice cream from Carvel across the street and reading comics. So he asked me to run the store. So I actually quit my job, which I disliked intensely at the time, and worked for Moose for a while. We had a bit of a contentious relationship, I have to say. Moose sold the store at one point, and I went along to the new owner. Was there in 8 years total, which was awesome. Best job I ever had. I have to say it was amazing. It was like my dream job working in a comic shop. And I was actually not just working there, I was managing the comic shop. And I had never had a retail background before. So it was great. But after I left there, then I, shopped at different stores over the years. Some closed. Some I just decided, you know what, maybe I could do a better store, and ended up back at Moose when Scott Hughes had bought the store. And loved the atmosphere, loved the vibe there. Sean was working there. Such a nice guy. He, took care of my books in a very conscientious way. And, then when Scott sold it to Matt, and then, of course, now Sean owning it, I have no plans on going anywhere else. I mean, that is like the store for me at this point. So, yeah, it's been a long time in New Jersey with Fat Moose.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for laying that out. I have a few follow-ups, but I mean, first and foremost, 1984, that's 2 years into Fat Moose. So, I mean, I can't imagine are there any customers that you're aware of who have an even longer tenure than yourself?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I haven't run into any that have been there that long.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, and we'll talk about the changes that you've seen over all these years, but that's one of the main reasons I wanted to have you here, because you have this incredible perspective. Just a real quick side note: we're talking about bagging and boarding the new comics. I know I mentioned this on another episode probably years ago, but I think the only time where I've encountered that was when my wife and I were in Hawaii for our honeymoon. And we went to a few comic shops on the island we were staying on. And I remember it might have been the first one. They had everything bagged and boarded. And I remember saying like, oh, this is unusual to see. And the guy like wasn't the most pleasant and was sort of like, of course we do that. It's something about the salt in the air, because they're so close to the ocean. I was like, all right. And then other shops that I went to didn't do that. So I don't know that was so much of an automatic thing, but that's the only time I've encountered that. And yeah, like yourself, I'm kind of like, I guess I get it to an extent, but I feel like it creates an unnecessary barrier, especially with the new books. I mean, I understand certainly, if it's rare or your back issue bins, but for new wall books, I feel like they should just be out there.
Well, the thing that bothers me about that, Anthony, is that when you go into a store, part of the joy is you're looking for maybe something new to read. You want to flip through something. I've been in Fat Moose at nights where Sean said, hey, check this book out over here. And I've got this new one over here. And you pick up the book, flip it, put it back. If you had to walk up with 10 books to their counter and ask them to open each one, they're going to give you the stink eye, because they're, oh, what's this guy doing? It discourages like the joy of what comics is all about, which is being able to discover new things and browse. And I don't get it. It's very impersonal to me.
Yeah,
that whole attitude.
For sure, I would agree with that. And then just for my own knowledge here, so it was a second Fat Moose location that you were working at, and then when Elon sold that, was it no longer Fat Moose? Was it a different shop?
It's still there. It's called Time Warp Comics in Cedar Grove.
Gotcha.
Although they're a comic shop at a game store, but I think they're from what I have seen, their focus has kind of shifted. Maybe I think gaming's probably 60, comics 40%. Now they do a lot of gaming. I mean, that was before the pandemic. Now you can't really have a lot of people come in and game like you used to. But they still do have a very, very large part of the store dedicated to gaming.
Gene, I'm jumping way ahead, but when it looked like Fat Moose might go away, when Matt, the third owner, was done with it a couple of years ago, before Sean stepped in, I know everything happened very quickly, so maybe this wasn't even something that you even could consider, but did the thought, given your background in Fat Moose retail, did the thought ever cross your mind of stepping in yourself, or is that not even something you would entertain at this point in your life?
I think it's, my last, I left Time Warp in like 91, 92. So I think I'd be too intimidated to jump into it at this point because I don't really know the market anymore. You know what I mean? It's a whole different ball game than it was back in the day.
Yeah, fair enough.
That Diamond catalog is like and plus dealing with Lunar and all.
Wait, is that I don't mean to interrupt. Is that a cat in the back?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
let me let him in the.
No, it's quite all right.
That's my cat.
We have a special guest star. That's quite all right.
This is Pippin. So he is my cat, and he is probably the most people needy cat you would ever want to see. So hello, Pippin. Well, Pippin, say hi to Phil and Anthony.
Oh, Pippin, you're welcome to sit in on this recording session.
Oh. He says, as long as I'm in the room, I'm fine.
Yes. So, Phil, let's jump back to you. So, I know you talked a little bit about finding Fat Moose, but I wanted to circle back because, and maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I think you said, when you first encountered Fat Moose, it wasn't necessarily an automatic that this is going to be my store. Could you elaborate on what was that first impression and why weren't you totally sold initially?
I had been into Fat Moose. I remember when I was younger, once at the Morris County Mall and then once by the firehouse. And I had taken a break from comics when I was in college, like so many people. I was just kind of kept my ear to the ground just to kind of see what was going on, that kind of stuff. And I remember I heard about Wolverine's origin finally being told. Wolverine's my favorite character. And I was like, all right, this is something I want to check out. All the comic places I knew of, long gone. So I happened to be, I think I was even just looking around on the internet. I don't remember how. Maybe it was just driving on Route 10 and I saw the sign for Fat Moose Comics. I remember walking into the store at the old Pine Plaza. At first, Elon was there. He was nice, but it wasn't that whole personal touch. We didn't know each other. He could, to be honest with you, at the time, if I remember correctly, I had graduated from school, but it wasn't working. So it was probably like one of those deals where I got up in the middle of the afternoon, probably looked homeless, just like walk in. And maybe he thought I was shoplifting or something. But I walk in, look a couple books, like, do you have this origin book? Oh, it's not out for a couple weeks. Like, okay. Walked out and left. I probably came back a couple weeks later to pick it up. And remember him saying it got delayed. And to me, to be honest, I think I was a little bit of a dick to Elon because I just didn't understand. What do you mean books being delayed? I've never heard of this. This is an Image. And we kind of had a little moment. But I came back and I wound up going back into Origin and then slowly going back into X-Men. And just over time coming in there, we kind of just sort of formed a bond, I guess you could say.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. There's so many factors. I think there's a lot that contributes to the overall atmosphere of a store, but obviously, most of it stemming from the person behind the counter, whether it's the owner or a staff person or a combination. I think that really sort of sets the tone for the store generally. But at the same time, so many factors, the alchemy of the, the circumstances that can lead you to really falling in love with a store or not, or being put off, by a store. Your mood at a certain point in time, the mood of the person behind the counter, like who else is there, what happens to be going on. So I'm glad that, that it worked out and that it became your shop. This question, I could very well have left this for the end, but I wanted to ask it early on because it's important, and I didn't want to like rush through it in the final minutes here. When I think of Take a Shot, alternate realities, I think the things that I think back to most are breaking down those new comic shipments on Wednesday mornings, back when it was Wednesday, but breaking down those shipments and being behind the counter, throughout the day on Wednesday, hanging out at the store on the Saturday and going out to dinner with the guys. Like those are the things that are most in my brain. Although I'll also say there were plenty of really quiet days that I would work at the shop as well. The Sundays and the Mondays where there wasn't a ton going on. And that was its own experience as well. But, when I think of the store, those are the things I think of most. So that's what I would love to pose to you guys. And Phil, I'll stay with you and I'll toss it to you first. When you think of Fat Moose, what are the either specific, memories or experiences or just the feelings that come to mind most for you?
For me, the very first thing I think of are the people, Sean, Justin, Elon. Elon's been gone now for, I don't know how long at this point, but to me, it's still very much, his imprint is still pretty much on that store. And it was just when I finally started coming around and Elon and I started sitting and talking for hours about really anything but comics, just anything that was going on in our lives. And we both had a lot going on at one point or another. We just kind of bounced off each other just so well. And then I was happy when that continued with Sean. So for me now, when I go to Fat Moose, it's not so much, I'm going to buy comics. I'm going to get my comics when I'm going to go see my friend Sean or I'm going to go see my friend Justin. To be honest with you, I told Justin this. I told Sean this rather. During this pandemic, I have only physically been in grocery stores, doctor's offices, and Fat Moose. That's it. And that's a testament to not so much I need my comics, but look, I need some connection with my friends.
Well said. And how about you, Gene?
Oh God. Let me tell you, Fat Moose Comic is not a comic shop. It's a clubhouse. It is like when I get out of work Wednesday and head over there, it's literally like walking into Cheers. It's like, hey, Gene, how's it going? You know, Sean's there, Justin's there. Yes, I get comics, but we talk about, hey, did you see Boba Fett yet? Did you see, whatever the new Disney Plus series is? We talk about movies. We talk about girlfriends and wives. We talk about it is literally like having the best place to hang out for everything geek related and even things not even tangentially geek related. It really is like a big group of friends that all love to hang out and just have a great experience on a Wednesday. And, even when if I go in on a different day, there's always somebody there hanging out in the store. Sean's showing us the new things he's done. I don't think you've been there anytime recently, Anthony, right? Sean put up black light posters in the stairway leading up to the store and black lights. They came out with this giant reissue poster book of the old black light posters from the 70s. And when you open a door to the store, it's like walking into the back of a Spencer Gifts in the 1980s. Like all these black light Marvel posters. It's amazing. He's got black light like tape up the hallway. And he's so proud of that. And it's like, come here, see what I did. He's so enthusiastic about everything. And it's contagious. It's not just he's excited for the store. He gets you excited for the store. He gets the people coming in excited for the store. It's a vibe I don't think I've ever come across at any other place I've shopped. It really is.
Well said. All right, let's take a really quick commercial break, and then we will continue our conversation. We'll be right back. Who do you call when you're in trouble? Alien invasion? Call Superman. Bank being robbed? Call Spider-Man. But who can you count on if you want to learn how to make a window bag? Philtastic Comics and Art is here to help. Whether it's fighting FOMO, talking about art, or baking wheat cakes, you can count on Philtastic for your comic and art-related infotainment needs. The best part? You don't even need a bat signal. Just look up Philtastic Comics and Art on YouTube. Subscribe today to keep up on everything Philtastic. If you're a fellow father out there, or if you're just interested in hearing a fun conversation, check out Shadadigans, a weekly podcast by dads sharing their dad experiences. Listen, relate, and laugh. One of the hosts has been a guest of this show, Justin DeVoe. In recent years, Justin has embarked on a truly remarkable fitness journey, which you can see for yourself on Instagram at RealLifeLobo. And if you're looking for guidance on your own fitness journey, check out at Iron and Honor. Film lovers and filmmakers should check out these festivals: Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, Point Lookout on Long Island, and In the Cut in Bloomfield, New Jersey. Event details and submission info can be found at filmfreeway.com. Follow the fests on social media for updates on discounts, tickets, and more. Also, be sure to listen to the Hang On to Your Shorts and Cullen on Film podcasts, available via a shared universe network. Acme Comics is a locally owned and operated full-service comic book store in Greensboro, North Carolina for people of all ages and walks of life. Established in '83, this 9-time Eisner Award nominee uses their collective knowledge and resources to connect you with the best material available. They are ready and excited to assist you in navigating the wide world of comics. In addition to weekly new releases, graphic novels, and merchandise, they pride themselves on their significant contemporary and vintage back issue selection. Mail order subscriptions to new releases are available. All offerings are available to anyone, anywhere via mail order. Follow Acme on social media and eBay, listen to the Acme Cast on all podcast services, and visit acmecomics.com for much more. Flat Squirrel Productions is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. It helps support the show too. Thanks. And we're back. So, a couple of things that, or actually one thing that both of you said that really, really resonated with me is this idea that, it's the talk isn't always about comics. And that's very much what my experience. I had the same type of experience at Take a Shot AR, where, by the way, please don't anyone actually play this game. I mean, unless you're, if you're at home, you don't have anything you need to do. It's like, don't worry about it. Then, knock yourself out. But, if you're listening at work before you hit the road, maybe not. But, it was the same sort of thing at alternate realities where, especially those Saturday night dinners, there would be some comic talk, but not much. That was really secondary. And, I think, of course, of Rich Roney, the beloved elder statesman of our community. And I have these weekly phone calls with him. Like every Sunday afternoon, he calls and we chat for about an hour. And I treasure those. I love chatting with him. And there, again, some comic talk, but it's really funny. We always had this running joke at the store that Rich didn't really like comics, that it was a cover. We had this whole elaborate backstory we came up with because he's kind of a mysterious figure and we don't know a ton about him, and he lives alone and he travels a lot for work. We had this very elaborate backstory about him being an assassin or a secret agent or something, and that the idea was that comics were his cover story, and he didn't really like much of this stuff. And I have to tell you, in all these Sunday phone calls, I'm starting to think there might be something to that, because every time when the subject comes to comics, I don't know that there are many comic storylines and runs that he's read all of. It's very piecemeal. It's always like he's read a few pages here or an issue there. So I don't know. Anything could happen. But I bring up Rich Roney, Gene, because, looking at the parallels between the two stores, it feels to me like you occupy a similar space. And I know Rich has been to the store. Have you ever actually met him?
Yes. I consider myself to be the Rich Roney of Earth 2.
That's,
I'm Rich Roney, but across a parallel dimension, so I look different and I have a different name. Kind of like Kal-El with just an L instead of an EL. So
that's so gracious that you assign yourself Earth 2. If you had said that you were Earth 1 and he was Earth 2, I would be like, that's perfectly fine.
No, Rich Roney is definitely the prime Rich Roney.
So you've met and the universe didn't implode. You were both able to be in the same time and space. I don't know, how involved of a conversation you had, but did you find that you had stuff in common? Did you talk about comics at all?
We chatted a little bit in the store. He had come in to visit, and there was a lot going on, and I got to have a short conversation with Rich. Very nice guy. I would love to hang out with him sometime and get the opportunity to really have an in-depth conversation with him. But unfortunately, I really didn't get long enough to chat with him to really get the whole experience. But I was very excited to meet him, because it's like, after seeing all your documentaries, it's like, oh my God, this is Rich Roney. He's from AR. He's a celebrity.
That's awesome. If you'll indulge me for a little lightning round here, I know this is silly, but I'm just curious as to how much of a counterpart you really are to Rich Roney. And I wonder if you're going to have similar responses or the polar opposite. I don't know. So I'll just throw a few quick things. Justice Society, fan or no?
Huge fan. Right. Huge fan.
Check. Favorite character in the JSA?
Classic JSA is probably Alan Scott. 2 for 2.
This is amazing. All right, what else? Well, the fact that we're doing this on Zoom maybe answers my question, but how are you with technology? Do you utilize it? What sort of television setup do you have? I know I'm getting nosy. I hope you don't mind.
No, we have like a Samsung 55-inch widescreen TV downstairs. We've put the sound through a stereo for movies, and I'm very comfortable with technology. I'm not I have a decent cell phone and know how to use it and use Zoom. And I work for ADP, so you have to be comfortable with technology to use a lot of our client services tools and things. So it's almost a necessity. But I've never felt uncomfortable with technology.
Gotcha. And streaming services and things like that, you have those?
Oh God, Do you really? Okay. Disney Plus, Hulu, HBO Max, Discovery Plus, Amazon Prime, cable. Did I miss anything? YouTube. Watch stuff on YouTube. I am a streamaholic.
All right.
Oh, so, Netflix. How could I forget Netflix? In the middle of watching third season of Lost in Space on Netflix right now. Which I know came out a while ago at Christmas, but I'm just catching up now. So I am addicted to the Marvel shows on Disney Plus, and the Star Wars shows on Disney Plus. Let me tell you something, Anthony. Back years ago in the 70s, David Jarrell, the sci-fi writer, wrote a book called The World of Star Trek. And in it, he talks about two different philosophies, which is geekdom is a way of life and geekdom is just a hobby. I have always been geekdom as a way of life. I am like probably one of the geekiest people you'll ever meet.
No, right on.
My interests are 100% like,
no, it's
maybe a little crazy. But.
No, it's fair. Listen, it's all passion. I think it's it could be unhealthy in certain instances if anything taken to an extreme. But I think generally speaking, it's a very healthy outlet for someone to have. But all right, so that's where you and Rich really diverge severely because Rich is still watching, and we've busted his chops on the show. So I'm not telling tales out of school or anything like that. But he famously. I don't care that I've told the story before. It's so baffling to me. He still watches TV on this like 20-inch rabbit ear television that he got in the early 90s as a gift from a car rental service. Because like I said, he traveled so much for work. He rented so many cars that this car rental service gave him a television. I don't know if it was a promotional thing or the person who ran it was just like, thank you for all this business. Here's a TV. I don't know, but that's still what he watches. And he inherited from his mother when she passed, sadly, but he inherited a flat screen television from her. And a bunch of us got him a Blu-ray player. This was back when Blu-ray players were expensive. Now you can get them for like $40 or $50. But I remember we all like chipped in and we got him this Blu-ray player. And the flat screen TV and the Blu-ray player are just sitting unplugged. And he just watches the little rabbit ear television. And I'll get off this Rich Roney tangent, but it's just so, you talk about passion and a way of life. It's so funny to me that he, in theory, loves all these characters, and all of us are always telling him about all of these shows that are out there, all of these superheroes, all the things that I'm sure as a kid he couldn't have even imagined that this stuff would exist. And, he reads articles about it and we talk about it, but he's never seen any of them. It makes me a little sad.
You know what, though? Do you think part of that could be kind of like how Alan Moore is like, I don't understand why people want to adapt my work just because how it's written and I guess how the reader, how you think about something when you read it. It's one way in your head and then it's quite another thing to see it up on the screen.
No, because he does see a lot of the movies and he'll watch the shows that are on broadcast television. So it's not this philosophical objection, but in any event, when Rich Roney eventually returns to the podcast, we'll unpack that one final time in our final round of episodes. But Phil, I wanted to ask you. Obviously, we've been talking about Sean Hendricks, who we love, a pal of ours, and both of you. This could apply to both of you, but specifically for you, Phil. You've known Sean before he owned the store, and you've known him since. What changes have you seen over these past couple of years since he took over the store right before the pandemic?
With the store or with Sean?
Sean himself. I'm curious what, if any, changes you've observed.
I'll be honest with you. I really didn't know Sean all that well until Scott took over, maybe towards the end of Scott's tenure, only because I think Sean was working just different shifts. But I remembered, in fact, I don't really think I remember Sean until Matt bought the store. And for me at that point, it was like, oh, wow, this guy's like really energetic and eccentric. That was my first impression of Sean. And then I slowly remember, kind of like what Gene said, that when you're around Sean, he just gets so excited about comics and about anything to do with the things that we love so much. It makes you excited. And at the time, that depending on who you were seeing when you went to the store, you didn't always get that feeling. And I think that that's kind of an important thing, whatever you're selling. You need your customers or your customer base to feel good about what they're buying. And when you're talking to somebody who gets you so excited about, this expensive paper, that's pretty much what comics are, it makes you feel good about it. So then fast forward a bit, when Sean takes over, I remember it was right around Christmas, and we get that call. And I don't know if you want me to go off on a little bit of a tangent, but at that point, I was actually almost out of comics. It was just, kind of adulting and like, I'm going to the store. And I at this point, I was trying to go just when Sean was working, to be honest with you, just to get that great kind of conversation or great feeling like, oh, here's somebody I can talk to comics about. But the vibe when Sean wasn't there, it didn't feel great. And that's nothing against anybody. It just was like, okay, I'm here. It was a transaction at that point. And I remember having one conversation and just walking out and was like, I don't know why I'm buying this anymore. And I actually sat down, I had a long talk with my wife, and I was like, maybe it's time I just kind of stop collecting. Well, you don't have to, but maybe you should think about it more. And then really less than a week later, Sean reached out to me. He's like, just so you know, I'm now the owner of the store. And I was like, oh my God. And it was almost like a sense of urgency, like, okay, I can't leave now. I have to go back. And just when Sean took over, I think it was more of a feeling like all the stars aligned. Like, this is something that should be, Michael Jordan plays basketball. A-Rod or whatever plays baseball. Sean Hendricks sells comics. And so Sean Hendricks is Fat Moose, the once and future Moose. And from that point on, it was just kind of, I don't know. It's like, it's almost like you're seeing your brother there, like running things. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but I'm proud of him. And you see him jumping leaps and bounds. You see him kind of learning to balance that home and work life. When he has struggles, because look, it's business. Any business has struggles. You feel for him, and you're like, okay, what can I do to help? And really, without sounding too cliche, I couldn't be prouder of him.
No, that's a beautiful sentiment, and one I echo, even though I haven't really been able to see it in person, but through my conversations with him and seeing all the posts and everything, and the Fat Moose Facebook group and all that stuff. It's when I knew that Sean was taking over the store, and even before the pandemic, but even when the pandemic hit, I was still optimistic for him for a couple of reasons. I mean, he has the enthusiasm, he has the passion, he has the history and the experience at the store. It wasn't like he was coming into this cold. It wasn't as if he was trying to open a store. So, I knew that would serve him well. And then the other major piece, bringing it back to the topic of our episode here, is the herd. Is the Fat Moose herd, is the fact that he has this loyal customer base. And as much as, you obviously always want to have growth, and, I know we had spoken, pre-pandemic about, maybe having a convention presence and, and this and that. But at the end of the day, to have those Wednesday regulars or whichever day of the week, you happen to come in, that can go a long way. So that was, I think, one of the main advantages. And I'm so happy to see that, he was able to weather the past couple of years and usher the store into this 40th anniversary celebration. And Phil, you talked about this expensive paper. I know you did one of your YouTube videos not too long ago where you talked about scaling back, cutting down your pull list, but you made a point to say, hey, listen, but I'm not abandoning my LCS.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that's one of those things where I don't know that happens in too many other types of retail establishments where the customers are that, attuned to the needs of the business and sensitive to the owner. I mean, like how much of a role does that play in your calculus when you're saying, all right, I'm going to start trimming some titles?
I mean, it's difficult to say because there's not a budget, like I need to put in this much at Fat Moose, but like even right now, I haven't been there in a while. I have my pull list and I'll call Sean like, hey, look, I know I haven't been in yet. I'm not sure when I'm going to get in. Can I pay you now at least? So I want to make sure that I'm not screwing him over. We've all seen that that post of, I think you spoke to the store, if I'm not mistaken, that had the stack of pulls that just went uncollected. And I was like, no, I'm not going to leave anybody in that kind of instance. But a lot of it too is not only just budgeting; it's space. When I started collecting, it was easy to say, okay, well, I'm going to go and get Wolverine, X-Men, and Uncanny X-Men, and I'm good for the month. Now it's like, okay, well, here's the X-Men titles have grown from 3 titles to 5 titles to 10 titles, give or take at any time. And it comes to a point where you're like, okay, so what can I put my attention towards? Not just money, but just your time and your space. And at the end of the day, it's like, okay, I can support my LCS. I can buy independent books. I can buy image books. I don't necessarily have to go all in, because at the bottom line, if you go all in with anything and you're bankrupting yourself, not that I'm doing that in case my wife listens, of course, she knows I spend with my means. But if you're blowing all your money to the point where you can't afford anything, you're not helping anybody at that point.
Yeah, no, for sure. Gene, I want to ask you this big picture question about the overall arc of Fat Moose, because you've seen it under Elon, under Scott, under Matt, and under Sean. And like we said, so much of the feel of a shop stems from the owner, the person behind the counter, most of the time. So I know this is kind of a big question, and, feel free to be as, general or specific as you like, but I guess okay. I'm just curious over these years and under the different owners. And I know there have been different, durations certainly for each owner. I mean, obviously Elon owned it for the longest period of time, and then Scott was a couple of years, Matt was a few years, and now Sean only has a couple of years under his belt, but hopefully many, many more to come. So again, I know we're not talking about equal lengths of time here, but over the time that you've been part of Fat Moose, how have you seen the shop either physically or in terms of the vibe, the atmosphere change as the owners have changed?
I think, under Elon, it was, I had a bit of a contentious relationship with Elon, working for him. And, when I was a customer at his store, we were cordial, but he wasn't especially outgoing as far as, like talking about comics with me or stuff like that. He was he liked to play backgammon with a lot of friends that would drop by the store, and sometimes he'd be playing while I would be in there, and focus more on that than on the store. But then Scott was great, but he was sort of became an absentee owner. You know what I mean? He was very invested in his game store and Highlander, which, his passion was he loved comics, but his passion was gaming. So a lot of the day-to-day stuff he was leaving to Matt and Sean to take care of. But I think Scott is a great guy. He's very friendly, very outgoing, very cordial. It just, I didn't see a lot of him past a certain point. When Matt owned the store, I like Matt. He could be a little bit of a curmudgeon at times. And I think he got in over his head because he had a lot of ideas and things about what was going to happen to this with the store, and they really didn't come to fruition. He kind of got buried in the day-to-day, and that's why he was going to close the store. Sean literally has been a breath of fresh air. It just his passion and dedication. And it's so funny because, I mean, I know you guys know, he never wanted to run a comic store. He wanted to work in a comic store part-time because he's very passionate about his music. And, you know, he delivered pizza for years and years because that was a nice job he could do part-time while trying to focus on his musical career. So now he actually has a full-time job, but he is making the absolute best of it. And I think out of all the owners, I know Elon had a long run. He kept the store going for a long time. I just hope that Sean can maintain this passion and enthusiasm, because truthfully, I think it gets everybody fired up. And to me, this is really like the new golden age of Fat Moose. It really is.
That's, you know, it sounds that way. That's certainly the sense that I get. And, you know, I maybe concern is too strong a word, but I get what you guys are saying. And I too, you know, hope that Sean is able to maintain this and not get beaten down by the grind of doing this, because I mean, you know, look, you've seen it with prior owners at your store. I saw it at mine. That's why, take a shot. That's why Alternate Realities closed at the end of the day, right? It wasn't that, you know, Steve couldn't pay his rent or, you know, something like that. He just had enough. You know, he was frustrated and he was fed up and he didn't have any more enthusiasm for the material and or for the running of the business. So, but again, I think, you know, Sean's in such a great place and, you know, to have this community around him, I know that will go a long way. Now, Gene, I know you've mentioned a couple of times now this contentious relationship with Elon, and if you want to leave it there, that's totally fine. But is there, if you're willing to elaborate, is there anything that you can sort of, I guess my main question is, if you want to even answer it, was it more of a personal thing in terms of not necessarily like personalities not gelling, or was it different approaches to running the store? I guess that's kind of most curious about.
There were some odd things that happened that kind of, like there was a point where Elon bought a very large collection with a lot of Prime stuff in it. And he kept telling me he wanted the second store to succeed. He wanted the second store to do well. And I came into his store because I would go into his store at least once or twice a week, drop off money, talk to him about stuff. And he had bought this huge collection. And I said, oh, wow, this stuff is great. And I'm picking through this stuff. And I said, Moose, can I take this? I'd like to take this. We don't have any of these. And he goes, no, this is for my customers. And I said, but Moose, my customers are your customers. No, this stuff's not going in that store. This stuff is staying in my store. So how do you kind of reconcile that? You know what I mean? He was very, the day the new books come out, I'd sell out a Batman, say like an hour after store open. Moose, I need to order more Batman. No, don't order more Batman. But I sold out and people were asking for it. That's okay. You sold what we ordered. That's fine. That's not a way that I felt I could grow that business. So things like that happened over the years. And also at one point, he would call me up during the day and we didn't have a register that totaled stuff. I had a write out sheet and he would literally scream at me if I didn't know to the penny where we were at that point during the day when he called. So that kind of soured our personal relationship. I mean, I still loved the job. I loved the store. I did the best I could at the store. The fact that the store is still there obviously means that we had some level of success. You know, with a new owner, Dave, came in. But I don't have at this point. I don't have anything against Moose. I mean, I can't get in his head and know what he was thinking. I don't know if there was a level of frustration with how the store was doing at the time, or it's very hard to say. So, but I'm just saying it. I wish we had gotten along a bit better, because I think it would have made the store better earlier.
Sure. No, I appreciate you sharing that. And that, I think that does that really actually does give me a very good sense of what the dynamic was like, and maybe where some of that contention came from. And look, you guys in the audience, you heard this especially in the first season of this podcast. There were certain frustrations that a number of us had with some of the ways in which Steve ran the store. I mean, thankfully, on a personal level, we always got along. I mean, I think that's, well, not everybody all the time, but speaking for myself at least, we got along, and I think people generally did get along with Steve, even if sometimes we disagreed. And it was kind of funny to me in that first season of this podcast where there was an episode where I had one of our customers on, and what I said to him was, for a lot of us working at the store, and those of us in the inner circle here, it frustrates us that the store is so cluttered, that Steve will buy collections and not want to put them out. He wants to just hold on to them because he likes having them. And we're saying, but you could move these, you can sell them, things like that. And we said, or even beyond that, even things that were out for sale, but just sort of the state of disarray that the store was often in, especially towards the end. And I see, it kind of bugs us that there's all this clutter. Does it bother you? And his response was no. It wasn't something that he minded. Now, look, that's a very small sample size. Maybe there were others who walked in and they were like, "Oh, the store's a mess," and left. I don't know, but I guess I bring it up because there are things that maybe sometimes we feel so strongly about, especially as really an integral part of that community. But I don't know, to the casual customer or to the person passing by, maybe not. But in any event, I appreciate you sharing that. And kind of building off what I was saying, Phil, I'll toss this to you. I know, Sean, did the black light, and I know he's been, he's got the new releases written, on the board when they come in every week. I know he's been doing a lot of stuff. Is there anything that, and this is not, it's not like, oh, critique what he's doing. It's not even that, but are there other things that you've talked to him about, or that you just kind of hope he might implement in the future? Is there anything for you personally, like, I would love to see Sean do this?
At one point, I think when he first started, I was one of those people who would come in and say, "Oh, you know what you should really do now? You know what you should really do now?" And I think part of it was that, oh, this is the guy behind the counter that I'm friends with. Like, it's almost like you felt you own the store, but without any skin in the game, which clearly is not the case. And then at a certain point, you have to kind of let off the gas and look, he knows what he's doing. I trust his judgment. You don't know the pluses and minuses behind the scene. I mean, one thing that sticks out to me, if anything, just from the little bit I know about running a comic book store, which is just what I've seen Elon, Scott, Matt, and now Sean go through, is that it's a business that I feel like at least the people who should be supporting you the most, the publishers mainly, are just not there. Or if they're there, it's half-assed at the very least. So I don't have any official suggestions for Sean or anything like that. It's just, dude, whatever you want to do, go for it, and don't get sued.
Yes. That's always good advice. So, Gene, this Fat Moose herd business, obviously the term flows naturally from the name of the store, Moose, but do you remember when herd was first used to refer to this community at the store?
I think that's a fairly recent thing, really. I think we kind of started that when Sean, because I remember when Sean was buying the store, he wanted to set up a sort of, and then the pandemic hit, he wanted to set up a Facebook group to sort of keep people updated and aware. And I think I may have suggested that. It just, you're right. It just sort of flows, the Fat Moose herd. So, and that was just originally the name of the Facebook page that Sean was communicating to regulars with. during the pandemic. Some of the guys, the real regulars, but it's kind of taken on its own life now. And it's kind of gotten to be like the inner circle of people that are regulars that come in that Sean has a more than just a, say, taking your money and here's your books for the week relationship with.
Yeah, I love it. I think it works so well, and it really furthers that notion that you were talking about of the shop being a clubhouse. Now there's really a name we can put to it. I wish that at my old store we had that. We never did. It's funny. We would go out to dinner on Saturday nights, as we've discussed many times, and the most frequent restaurant that we went to was Mickey Spillane's in East Chester, New York. And we found this out way later, but they had a nickname for us. They called us the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which,
Wow.
Great.
before we
That's
knew
awesome.
I can't remember, I think it was one of the guys who worked there one day was just like, we have a nickname for you. And, there's that moment of dread where it's like, oh God, what's it going to be? Because look, as we've discussed on the show, like we had plenty of nicknames for customers at the store. Some of them knew, a lot of them didn't, and a lot of them was good that they didn't know. So it was one of those things that's like, oh God, what is this going to be? But League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was a solid one, but that was not one we that really stuck. That was just how they called us at the restaurant. Other than that, though, we would just sort of, I guess the category we came up with was friends of the store. And that encompassed, certainly the owners, but the staff and the customers who would go out to dinner. That was sort of when we would say a friend of the store, or in my first documentary, some of the people are credited on screen as friend of the store. That's essentially what that meant. It was that blend of owner, staff, customer who, customer plus, right? It wasn't just someone who came in on Wednesday, but we sort of had this next level. And kind of on that note, I wanted to ask you guys, and Gene, I'll start with you. Have these friendships, like these conversations and everything that you guys have at the shop, have they transitioned to outings, get-togethers outside of the store?
Not so much, only because of everything that's been going on since, the beginning of 2020. So, we talk about possibly doing stuff, but with everything going on at this point, I think a lot of people probably don't feel comfortable with that. So I'm hoping at some point it will, because a couple of us has approached Sean about going out after like Wednesday night to get a bite or something. But the problem is that, by that point, he's been there the whole day, and, he's been ringing up people and basically, to use a showbiz term, he's been on all day, So by 8:00 when the store closes, I think he's ready to like count the money and go home and like put his feet up and read a couple books before he crashes. So.
Yeah, well, that's totally understandable. No, and I certainly understand over these past couple of years that it hadn't happened. I guess I was curious if it had in the past, but I guess not. But let me say this, and Gene, I don't want to put too much pressure on you, but just going back to my own experience, the catalyst for most, if not all of the gatherings on Saturday, and we did ours on Saturday, and maybe in part for the reason you just articulated. Wednesdays are, tough, are a tough day for the person who's been behind the counter to, kind of keep it going. But the catalyst for those Saturday hangouts at the shop and subsequent dinners at the restaurant was Rich Roney. Rich Roney would come into town. He lives in New Jersey, about an hour and a half away from where the shop used to be. And the frequency varied over the years. There were stretches where he would come in every Saturday, but I would say on average, every other Saturday you could kind of count on. And when Rich Roney would come in, everyone would gather. So the point is, Gene, since you are the Earth 2 Rich Roney, I think this is kind of on you. I think it needs to be a thing.
I have to be the ringmaster.
I think so. I really...
No pressure.
No pressure.
I will take this responsibility on, believe me. I think we might have to Shanghai Sean a little bit, though, like maybe bring in a bag and some rope and like tie him up, let him out when we get to the restaurant, get a few drinks in so he relaxes.
Well, that was the other thing that I think allowed us to, at least to have Steve participate, was that for the most part, Steve didn't work Saturdays. We had one of the other guys would come in, and it was usually not one of the the regular, it was, a number of staff people has varied over the years, but for a long stretch, it was one of two guys who would be working on Saturday, and that was the only day that they worked. So, even if they were tired after they did, they still kind of had enough energy to, to still join for dinner, and Steve would just come in for that. So I don't know, I think maybe not a Wednesday. I think it's got maybe a Friday or Saturday. And, ideally if Sean gets to a point where he can have Justin or someone kind of watch the store and he doesn't have to be there all day, that would be a plus, but I think you can get around that. But I think it is this idea of it's funny, it wasn't even that Rich was the ringmaster, because it's not that, I don't think he ever even really, it wasn't like he said, hey, everyone, but we knew, it was just like we knew. He probably told Steve, and Steve let everyone know over the course of the week, and it just kind of built. But I think that's what this needs to really get to the next level here.
I think what we really need is for Sean to be able to get to the point where he's got somebody like that, because Justin comes in and helps him, but Sean really is there 6 days, except for Monday when he's closed, he's there every other day. So I think his weeks are just long. I think,
Yeah.
I'm hoping, but as the store builds, I'm hoping he can get somebody else in there that can take some of the pressure off him. Because, Sean always says, well, what happens if I'm sick? Because there is no real other full-time staff but him. So
yeah. And just going
back, a lot of pressure.
No, for sure. And so just going back to this routine. So both of you are Wednesday guys. You just go at different times of the day, right? Like Phil, you're more in the afternoon. Is that?
No. I usually go either just random times at weeknights, or every other weekend. I've been bad lately. I'm behind about a month now, just how busy we've been and whatnot. But I just make sure, like I said, to at least give a call and make sure at least I'm current and not leaving them in the wind there.
And would an out of shop, pandemic aside, let's assume once we're really out of that, but would an out of shop outing be something that you would be interested in? And is there anything in particular that you would love to see the herd do?
If there were no pandemic, yeah, I would love just to hang out with everybody, whether it be to go to a film. I know that I think Scott had started that at one point. He would just get a box of tickets or whatever for whatever Marvel movie or DC movie that was coming out, and just say, hey, whoever wants to come, let me know. Or, even just, like you said, hanging out for a bite to eat.
Yeah, no, right on. We didn't do a ton of, we didn't really talk much before we sat down to record this, but one of the things that I did say, if you want to give this some thought, I am planning to ask you this. So I don't know if either of you came up with anything, and if not, that's perfectly fine. But I was curious for both of you, any anecdotes from your time at Moose that you would want to share? I'll toss it to Gene first. Was there anything that came to mind?
Oh, anecdotes. I do remember you saying that. I don't really have any. It's just, I can't think of anything in particular. I know that Phil says he hasn't been there in a while. I am there every Wednesday night. I try and make it a point. I work at ADP, which is in Parsippany, which is, very near Whippany. So I leave work around 6 o'clock, 6:30, drive down the road. Fat Moose is 10 minutes from there, climb up the massive staircase, and hang out there until Sean throws us out. At 8 o'clock, he goes, guys, it's closing time. It's closing time. Sometimes we coax him to stay a little longer, but, he's had a long day by that point. But just want to, I don't know if I can't really think of any particular anecdotes per se. I apologize, Anthony. It's just.
No, it's quite all right. How about you, Phil? Did anything come to mind for you?
Not really with anything under Sean. There were a couple stories that popped up, to be honest with you, just the little things. But really, I think the best story I could tell, and maybe this is just not only for the Fat Moose audience, but for if somebody owns a comic shop or works at a comic shop, or even just customers. when I was getting back into comics, I came to a point where I was reading the X-Men, I was reading the Avengers before they put out 15 of them, and dabbling a little bit into DC. And I think the probably what made me really click with Elon the most is I went up to him and I said, hey, look, I want to try something new. What can you recommend? And I didn't go with all his recommendations, but just not just saying, this is my favorite book. Just because when you open up that dialogue, I think it opens up more to the story behind the book and why that's your favorite, and to memory. And that's how you, I think, really kind of connect with somebody. And I had that same conversation with Sean, and sure enough, took Sean up on some of his recommendations, not all. But I really think that that's kind of something unique about Fat Moose, or about any good comic book store owners, that you can connect through these stories and whatnot.
This art of the recommendation is something that, I'll be perfectly honest, was not a huge thing at our store. It would happen, but it was, and this is a positive. I mean, it would really just happen organically. We would be talking about something and maybe a customer would overhear, or we would be talking with the customer and share what we liked. But what I've seen now in my travels to all these other shops, including Moose, including Acme Comics in North Carolina with Lord Retail, there's really this conscious effort to engage in that type of conversation and to make recommendations, not to force them on people, but to really, create a moment where that can happen, where you can have that, make those recommendations. And it's awesome to see. And I think that's the way to, look, it might be someone who's coming in for the first time, and you might create a new comics reader, or even if it's, an existing customer. Yes, if you really want to be mercenary about it, it's like, hey, you're selling them something else. But, I think especially when you're recommending something to someone that's not in their wheelhouse, maybe, but the owner or staff person, whoever it is, can make that connection point. Like, hey, you like this, so you would probably also like that. It just broadens that person's perspective and opens up this whole other pocket to their reading and their fandom. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So I love that he does that, and I agree with you. I think that's one of the things for a successful shop that can really make a difference. And tying this all back together, that's why I do hope that Sean maintains this passion, right, for the business, but for the material. Because I think, and that's certainly, I think, what happened with Steve at a certain point. He wasn't reading anything anymore. So how could you make those recommendations? You're basing it off of sales or solicitation copy.
I have to agree with you, Anthony, because here's the thing. I have shopped at stores where the guy doesn't read comics, or he reads one or two comics, and it's like, so how's this? Oh, I don't know. I just stock it. I don't really read that book. Sean does, and there have been times where I've come in and Sean said, hey, Gene, I read this last night. You got to check this out. It's really good. And he'll recommend a book because he takes a pile of books home with him and sits and plows through the stuff he likes. And if he thinks I'd be interested, he'll point things out to me that I might not be getting. And I really appreciate that, because a lot of stores don't do that. There is a very well-known comic shop in New Jersey that I will not mention. But if I walk in there, walk through the aisles, pick out a few comics, walk up to the shelves, no one there will engage me at all until I walk up to the counter. And it's like, hey, how you doing? Did you find what you're looking for? And that's about it. But actually having someone that reads the material, that's interested in the material, that wants to actively say, and a lot of times with Sean, what I like is that I don't get the feeling he's doing it because he wants to sell a book. He's doing it because he really loves it. It's like, dude, did you read this? This is so cool.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about it, because he's got the passion for the material. Like Immortal Hulk, I was not going to read Immortal Hulk at first. He started reading Immortal Hulk and said, gee, really, you got to check this out. And next thing I know, I said, okay, get me the issues I missed. And I would come in when the new issue came out. We would talk about it, get enthusiastic about it. It's his passion gets your passion up. So, and every comic shop should have somebody like that. Somebody that really wants you to enjoy the material as much as they do. Not because they're trying to make a buck, which is ultimately the point of owning a business, is to make money, but because you love what you're doing.
No, I agree. I again, even though I haven't seen a ton of it in person, but from what I have seen, I really do get the sense with Sean that it is so pure. Like he genuinely thinks you would like this and wants to share it with you. And that is a very beautiful thing. I think that's awesome. And, this whole business about other types of shop experiences, like I've had a bunch now, and it's 7 years since my regular place has been gone. And so, I've been other places, and, sometimes for the podcast or documentary, but other times because I need to pick up something. And, especially at this point in my life, even the pandemic aside, it's like to go, I don't have a comic shop that's 5 minutes away from me. That's the distance that I used to have to go where I used to live. And when my store was there, it was great. So, but now it's like, the closest shop for me would be an hour round trip almost. You got to find parking, got to figure out childcare. It's like, there's a lot that's involved in it. And so if you go to the store and you don't really get much more beyond the transaction, there are other ways to get this material. And in a lot of instances, and you get it cheaper. So there has to be something, I think, that makes it worthwhile, makes it an experience that you really want to keep having. And obviously that's what you guys have at your shop. And I think that's awesome. I love to see it.
One thing I got to say, though, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the Fat Moose Instagram page when Sean is doing some, we'll say, voluntary editing for the Big Two.
For the Big Two. Wait, I didn't even know. I know there's a Fat Moose Instagram page, but I didn't know that he even had the password for it. Is it active?
It kind of is, I guess you could say, but Sean usually puts the stuff up on Facebook too. Just, it makes me crack up when he's reading an issue and they make like a spelling mistake or a grammar mistake or an art mistake. And I said to before, I've said to before, why don't you just start like tweeting the editors directly or something like that? I think you could get a second gig as a voluntary editor, I guess, if you wanted to.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I wasn't thinking about it, but it's so funny to me because he's such an easygoing guy, but that really bugs him. You're right. I wasn't following exactly what you were saying initially, but yes, when he picks up errors in comics, I do see it primarily on Facebook when we'll post photos of those, but yeah, it's hilarious. And he genuinely seems bugged by it. And I don't blame him. I think not to speak for him, but I think his sense is like, look, there are people whose job it is to catch this stuff and it costs a lot of money for the customer and so on. So, we got to be more careful about this stuff. So, again, I think his points are valid, but yeah, it's so funny to see that.
That's one of Sean's two pet peeves is spelling grammatical mistakes in comics and people that park like idiots in his parking lot.
Thank you. I was waiting for that.
When you go to Facebook and there's a Fat Moose post and it's some guy that's like parked like this and the lines go like this, Sean takes a picture of it and like just, it's so funny because it just infuriates him so much.
Yes, that is hilarious too. It's always surprising to me because I mean, is it always the same? Is it the lot at the store, or he just sees this all over the place?
It's North Jersey.
It's a lot at the store. Because remember, there's the dry cleaner downstairs, and then there's the deli near the dry cleaner. So there's a lot of people that come into the parking lot that aren't Fat Moose customers, and those are the ones usually that he's catching. Basically like just parking anywhere, taking up spaces for his customers.
I told him he's got to start like going out to those cars and leaving a note or something and saying, hey, clearly, if you think this is a good parking job, clearly you can suspend disbelief. Take this and I'll give you a free Batman comic or something.
That would be great. Yeah, I know. I think between the editing catches and the parking, there's something we could have a viral moment social media wise. I really feel like there's potential there.
Yeah,
Well,
or
we
even
all have
just,
our triggers, and I think those are two of Sean's big triggers. So
I was going to say, even if he just yelled from the balcony, like the French soldiers in Monty Python, just taunting people as they're parking. Throw that up on. I could easily see Sean doing that.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right, parting words, gentlemen. First of all, thank you so much for being part of this. The last question that I want to pose, and I'll pose it to both of you. And, you know, if you don't necessarily have a specific answer for this, any final words that you want to say are perfectly fine. But to give this a little structure, I guess what I'm curious about is, again, we're doing this in large part because the shop is celebrating 40 years, which for any business is pretty staggering, especially for a local comic shop, and one that's weathered, you know, numerous changes in ownership and a pandemic and all sorts of stuff. So I guess I'm just curious. I know obviously you have a lot of love for Sean, you have a lot of love for the shop and for comics, and so that's amazing. To what extent is there a sense of pride in being part of a store with that longevity? And maybe the answer is I don't really think about it much, and that's totally fine. But I guess to what extent does the store's long-standing operation in New Jersey I kind of mean anything to you? I guess I'll toss it to Gene first.
I think it's very cool. I'm very pleased to shop there, and Sean conveys that sense of pride. You know what I mean? Because we talk about it in the store sometimes, about the fact that the store has been there forever and how he has like a responsibility. And that was a lot of why he wanted to own a store in the first place, because he couldn't see a store that had been there that long and had that tradition like die from neglect. So he wanted to be the person that like kept that going. And it is a point of great pride for him. And I think a lot of us who shop there have that pride, Anthony, because, you know, I have seen so many stores come and go in New Jersey since I've lived here. I mean, I moved to New Jersey in '84, and I can, on two hands, just off the top of my head, count the stores that were there and are gone now. And Fat Moose has endured, and not just endured, it's thrived. So that's a hell of a lot to be proud of.
Absolutely. How about you, Phil?
I mean, really just going right with what Gene said, for any business to be alive and well decades after they opened their doors for the first time, and then you add, especially in an industry that has changed so much, so many ups and downs, and, you know, really, again, where you have your partners, Marvel and DC, in my opinion, at least, not doing their part to really support you. I mean, to endure all of that, plus this little pandemic we've been in, it's astonishing.
Yeah, well said. Well, I want to thank you both so much for being a part of this installment of Oldest in New Jersey. I'm so glad that we could all connect. I'm glad you guys could have this dialogue as well, since I know you haven't, had as much interaction at the shop. I want to thank the audience for tuning in, and make sure that you come back in 1 month for the conclusion to Oldest in New Jersey. Don't miss it. Until then, don't be a flat squirrel. Support the show and receive exclusive bonus episodes at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. Check out my Superman podcast, Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey, available on all major podcast platforms. And be sure to watch the documentary film My Comic Shop Country on Amazon, Apple TV, and CuriosityStream.